All right, so I'm going to try something new today during the workout. As we start to warm up, I'm going to share a story, one of the many stories I have from my time in the Army so far. Some people have been wanting to hear about some of the things that I've done. I haven't done anything spectacular, but I have experienced some pretty crazy times at certain points in my career. So today I'm gonna share with you a story, something that happened back when I was in my early 20s when I first joined the Army. And there are a lot of lessons to learn, mainly that it's always good to tell the truth, even if you think that you're gonna get in trouble for it. Lying or trying to cover things up is what gets a lot of people in trouble, both in life and in the military. Sometimes there are cover-ups. So I'm going to share a story about an experience that I had with making the choice to tell the truth rather than trying to cover things up. So we're going to start off with our first 3-minute jump with the rhythm rope, and I'll start this story. So I was about 22 or 23 years old. I was stationed at Fort Hood, Texas. That was my first duty assignment, and my first assignment after the unit that I was with got back from Iraq. They got back from Iraq right when I got there. My first job was as a distribution platoon leader in a forward support company. And a forward support company is a company that is attached to an infantry, armor, or field artillery battalion. And all you do in that company is you provide logistics support to that combat arms unit because they don't have the organic ability to support themselves, so they rely on the forward support company to do that. So my job as a distribution platoon leader, I was in charge of about 60 soldiers, and we had the job of providing retail fuel support, ammunition support, transportation support, any kind of retail support that these infantry folks would need. And the battalion I was supporting was a combined arms battalion, so it was, and it still is today, it still exists today. It was 2 companies of tanks and 2 companies of Bradley fighting vehicles, and then a headquarters element in that battalion that handled all the admin actions for the battalion. I would say when I got there, I had no idea what I was doing, as most second lieutenants have absolutely no clue what they're doing, and you have to learn on the job. I remember my company commander, I think he was a nice guy, but he, for whatever reason, he wasn't the best leader, and there wasn't a whole lot of mentorship going on there. So I had to learn a lot of things on my own, and it was difficult. It was probably the most difficult job I've ever had in the Army, probably because I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. And back then I didn't feel like I was getting a whole lot of help, so I had to figure a lot of things out on my own. So that leads into the story of the ammunition residue, all the ammunition caps that my platoon lost, and that initially I didn't know where they were, and I didn't try to blame it. I thought that the infantry folks had lost them, but really I had lost them. So I'm going to tell a story about that and how embarrassing it was, but how I told the truth when I found out that we had the missing ammunition, and I came clean, and it ended up working out well for me. So one of the jobs that we had that I told you a couple minutes ago is we had the job of supporting ammunition operations. So that means anytime the battalion that we supported had a range, we would have to pick up the ammunition from the ammunition holding area or the ammunition support point at Fort Hood, and we had to deliver all of that ammunition to the range. And then once the infantry and armor guys were done shooting, we had to pick the ammunition residue back up and then take it back to either the AHA, the ammunition holding area, or the Fort Hood ammunition support point or ammunition storage point. The problem with that was that Fort Hood had these strict rules where you had to recover at least, I think it was 90% of the ammunition residue so that they could recycle those rounds and make new rounds with them. So what that entailed was the infantry guys out at the range, after they shot at the targets, they would have to clean up all the brass, all the empty shell casings, because when you shoot a round, anybody who's familiar with weapons and firearms, is when the round goes down range, the shell is ejected. So you have to pick up all the shells from your rifle that your rifle ejects. Much of the time, they would only pick up about 80 to 90%, 85% of the rounds. And then we would get stuck with the blame. The Fort Hood ammunition support point or ammunition storage point would not accept the ammunition because we didn't clean up enough of it. And this always got put on us, but it wasn't our fault because all we did was deliver the ammunition and then pick the residue back up or whatever ammunition they didn't lose. So this became a battle every single time, because the battalion would say, well, that's your job. Your job is to support us. We don't need to pick up anything. You guys need to figure this out. And then we would say, no, this is not our job. You all need to police the range. We're not out there policing the range for you. We're just dropping the ammunition up and picking it back up. And we can't do our job if you don't police the range up. So this went on for months and months, and we ended up getting to the point where we delivered some ammunition to a huge training exercise. And we got back maybe 30 or 40% of the ammunition. It was way, way short. It was short to the point that we were wondering where it was, and we had no idea what was happening. And this is when things came to a head, because whenever we'd have these shortage of residue, we'd have to go to our battalion commander, who was an infantry guy, and he would begrudgingly sign so that the ammunition document could be cleared so that we could draw more ammunition. If we didn't get this document signed by the battalion commander, then we could not draw more ammunition, which means that they couldn't train anymore. So the Fort Hood ammunition point had it locked, and they had these ridiculous, stringent rules that were almost impossible to follow. And I'm sure they still have these rules. Hopefully they relaxed after all these years, but I would highly doubt it. And they would not. There was no flexibility there. So we're in this situation where the battalion commander is having to sign off on this tremendous ammunition residue shortfall in the middle of this huge training exercise that we're trying to do to prepare to deploy to Iraq. We ended up leaving 4 or 5 months down the road, and I go and try to get it signed by him, and he looks at me and he says, I'm not signing this. This is ridiculous. There's something wrong here. You all need to fix this. And he knew very well that if he didn't sign it, that we would not be able to draw any more ammunition for his training exercises, but he did it anyway. And looking back, I respect him, because I wouldn't have wanted my name on that either. But at the time, I just said to myself, man, we just can't get anybody to cooperate with us, and we can't master this division of labor where these guys are taking responsibility. So he told me to get with the battalion XO, and we started an investigation. And when you start an investigation in the Army, you always appoint an investigating officer. And the investigating officer was a captain. I was a lieutenant at the time. And this guy started going through everything. He started asking me a bunch of questions. I had no idea where the missing ammunition was. I had no clue, and we had just a ton of stuff going on in this platoon. We had, at the same time of this ammunition fiasco, we had fuel operations that we were constantly doing. We had to maintain our vehicles. We had to train for our deployment. We just had so much going on. The op tempo at Fort Hood back then, with these back-to-back deployments that we were going on, it was insane. I'm sure it's still insane these days as well, because most units on Fort Hood deploy constantly. So we're in this situation, we've lost this ammo, and as a young second lieutenant, I start thinking that I know everything. And so I get with the battalion XO, and the investigating officers already started asking me a ton of questions. And I said to the battalion XO, well, I don't know where all this ammo is, sir, but I can teach a class on ammunition if you want me to. And he just looked at me and laughed and said, okay, maybe some other time. What I didn't know, and this came out later, was that all of the residue was in the back of a truck and a trailer that belonged to my platoon. It belonged to my platoon, and it was in our motor pool the entire time. And I didn't know this. It took about 3 or 4 days for me to figure this out. But what I failed to do is, even though I asked all of my NCOs, all of my leadership in my platoon, I asked them, I said, where is this ammunition? Check all the vehicles. I can't go to the battalion and accuse them of not turning in all this brass and get the colonel to sign off on this ammunition clearing document until I know for sure that the ammunition is not with us. And they assured me, they said, no, sir, it's not. We checked all the trucks. We checked everything. The brass is either on the range and they didn't pick it up, or one of them has it in the back of one of their vehicles. So I took their word for it. And looking back, the lesson that I said here to myself is that you want to always, you never want to micromanage anybody, but at the same time, you have to be able, as a leader, you have to be able to use discretion to understand when it's a good idea to check behind your people. And I did not do that. I trusted, and that was my fault, because they had a ton of stuff going on, and the ammo brass ended up being in the back of one of the trucks. So after the investigation started, and the captain had been asking me a ton of questions, I said, I don't know where the ammunition is. It's got to be with the infantry guys or the armor guys somewhere. One of my NCOs, who I had asked to check all of the trucks, came up to me and said, sir, I need to tell you something. And I said, well, what do you need to tell me? And he said, well, we found a lot of brass, and we think it's from the investigation. And I said, you've got to be kidding me. Where is it? He said, it's in the motor pool. I walked out to the motor pool, and sure enough, on the back of a truck and a trailer, an army truck and a trailer, there was tons of empty brass, of ammunition brass. And I knew right then and there, my heart sank, and I knew that this was the missing brass. And my heart sank because I knew that this was going to be a problem for me, because I'm overall responsible for everything that happens or doesn't happen in my platoon. That's what they teach you in the Army, is that you have to take ownership. So even at the young age, I knew that this was going to come back on me, and that even though I had asked my NCOs to check everything, even though I had specifically asked them to do that, for some reason, they either didn't put 2 and 2 together or didn't figure out that this was the missing brass, or they just didn't do it. But that was my fault for not checking. And I resolved, at that point, I looked and I said, well, someone's going to have to take the blame for this, and it's going to be me. One of the things I regret is that I looked at that NCO and I said some things that I shouldn't have said to him. I said something to the effect of, every time I put you in charge of something, you screw it up. And I remember when I said that to him, I looked him right in the eye, and I immediately felt regret. And he looked at me and he said, I can't remember exactly what he said, but there was so much hurt and pain in his eyes, and I can still see it. And he said something to the effect of, sir, I really don't appreciate you talking to me like that. And then we just looked at each other, and then he walked away. And I later on apologized to him. He wasn't the brightest person in the world. He wasn't the greatest NCO in the world, but he was a nice man and he tried his hardest, and I should not have treated him that way. And I do have a lot of regrets, leadership regrets in the Army, but that is up there near the top, is that I couldn't control my emotions and I couldn't just stay quiet and at least say something like, just leave me alone for a little bit. I need to process this. I was feeling miserable and I shared my misery with somebody else, and that's never the right thing to do. But that's what happens when people are hurt. They hurt other people. You've heard the term hurt people. And I think that's what I was going through. I had been through a lot in that job and I was having a lot of problems processing it. So what I did that night, I believe that was a Friday, and I went back to my house after work. I didn't get off of work before 6 or 7 p.m. every single night at that job. The hours were just ridiculous. And I picked up my cell phone and I called the captain investigating. I said, "Sir, I have something to tell you. And I've been debating telling you this, but today we found all the lost ammunition. It was on one of the back of my vehicles. I am completely at fault here. I don't know what to do next, but I assume that you're going to need to tell the colonel and the major, and we're going to have to deal with this, and I'm prepared to take any punishment that comes down to me from the battalion." I also told my company commander, and he was fairly upset, but he had such a bad temper. I had been privy to him losing his temper so many times I really didn't take it seriously. I was more concerned about the colonel because I had a lot of respect for him and I thought he was a good leader. So the investigating officer, he went ahead and he told the people that he needed to tell. He told the colonel and the battalion XO. I had heard that the colonel was in the motor pool. He saw the ammunition. I wasn't there, thank goodness, because he probably would have blown his stack on me. But it ended up not being as bad as I thought it was. And this is the lesson and the moral of the story, is that when you find yourself in a situation where you need to choose between telling the truth, which could bring some unpleasant consequences, or trying to cover it up, you always need to tell the truth. I had a whole bunch of scenarios going through my mind. Maybe we can take this ammunition, throw it into the creek in the back of Fort Hood and back of the cantonment area. Or maybe I can take it all in my truck and drive it all the way down to Austin and throw it in the river. I had so many scenarios going through my head, but I knew that eventually it would get found out. And even if it never did get found out, I would have to live with that for the rest of my life. So I chose to tell the truth. And as a young officer, I think people, the colonel especially, he knew what I was up against. He knew my company commander wasn't all that great. He knew that I was trying my best. I think he took mercy on me. I still was promoted. I got a good OER, officer evaluation report, and I was actually promoted to company XO in the same company right before our deployment, and I served as the company XO for our entire deployment. That was a tough job as well, but at least I had learned a lot from my platoon leader time. What I didn't realize at the time is that I was young. I didn't have a lot of experience. If I had made a mistake like this at the point I am at this point in my career, then it would have been much, much different than making that mistake at 23, 24 years old. And I didn't understand that back then because I held myself to such a high standard, and I didn't have the same attitude that I have about failure. I thought that failure was absolutely the worst thing in the world. And that experience with the ammunition was part of me transitioning my views toward failure to, this is not such a bad thing. Failure is not a bad thing. It sucks, but it's not terrible. And it's not something that you can't recover from. And I ended up recovering from it and realizing that failure is a good thing as long as you learn the lessons that you need to learn. I also didn't realize that there were a lot of variables that were set against not only me, but against anybody that would have been in that job. The rules at the ASP, the crazy rules that Fort Hood has for ammunition. I understand they have to have those rules, but some of them were unrealistic, to say the least. The structure, the leadership structure in my company, a lot of things that I didn't realize because I always tried to take ownership for myself that were working against me. That ended up making me a better leader, but that I didn't realize were making the job a lot harder than they should have been. So as we close up here with the 25 double unders, I will reinforce the lessons here that telling the truth rather than trying to cover things up is always the right thing to do when you're in a situation like that. If I had not told the truth and I had tried to cover things up, it would be hard to believe that I would be in the position that I am today in the Army. So always tell the truth, do the right thing, especially when no one's looking. And when in doubt, tell the truth. Always tell the truth. Don't try to cover things up. One of the toughest things about this story is that the colonel that I talked about in this video passed away in 2016. He passed away about 6 years after this all happened, and he had been struggling with PTSD for a long time, and he ended up committing suicide. And it was a blow to all of us who had served under him. He wasn't the perfect leader by any means. There's nobody out there who's perfect, but he did care about his people. And I know the first thing that I thought about when I heard that he had passed away was how he gave me a second chance, and that if he hadn't, there would be a low possibility that I'd be where I am today, and that I would have continued to get promoted and move on in the military. So even though he's gone, I do want to pay my respects to him and let him know that I'll never forget him taking mercy on me and seeing this situation that I talked to you about in this video as something that I could recover from rather than something that I needed to be punished for. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that you enjoyed the story and that you got some value out of it. Please subscribe, hit the thumbs up button, and share the channel with your family and your friends. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, jump rope to freedom. Peace. Thanks for your support. Take care.